guys, it's Little Gem here, and today I'm going to attempt to teach you how to make the Sage's new weapon, a Noulith. And I'm going to break this into two parts because the tutorial is actually very long. First part is going to be about this part here, which is a resin cast thing. I think it's supposed to be some kind of ether, but the actual expansion isn't out yet, so I don't really know much about it. So I want you to bear in mind that I made and filmed this entirely by myself. I'm not sure that it's the best way of doing it. I made this before the expansion came out, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. And I'd also like to point out that this is probably by far the hardest thing or prop I've ever made, for multiple reasons. And these reasons are the price. It is the most expensive thing I have ever made. And I normally find ways of cutting costs, so that might seem a bit of a shock, but this one is something you can't really cut costs with. This part in particular is actually where all the money sort of goes. Also, there are so many different techniques in this. That's what also makes it difficult, so if you're a beginner, I would not recommend this, but it might be interesting and you could learn something anyway. But that being said, if you would like to learn a lot of different techniques for one prop, this is by far the best prop to do that for.
Okay, using the file provided or your own, you start off by printing and sanding, filling and sanding, and then priming and sanding the piece. Next, I used monster clay to completely cover half of that piece once it's perfect, or at least good enough for you. But you want to make sure there's at least about an inch below this piece. Really sand it and smooth so that the sides are completely touching, and you really want to clean up the model so it's flat as possible. Then you're going to want to make it in a neat box that you can either take apart or rip apart, and make some registry holes using any sort of tool, just so that it's easier to line back up. Next, I started mixing the silicone. I'd recommend this silicone, or I'll put it in the link in the description. And you really slowly want to add it just to the corner. This stops bubbles and making sure that it really sits nice and flat. Once that's set, you want to take apart the box, take off the clay, clean up the model, and it should look like this. If you can rescue your box, I'd recommend doing that. I couldn't, but then I made a new one which was pretty much identical. And it's really important to use this. If you don't use this, then you might have to pry it open with a knife and your registry keys will be lost. And once that's set, repeating the same steps, you want to take apart the box. At first it might be really hard to get apart, but just keep going and trust me, it will open up and look like this. I used 2 pieces of cheap wood just to keep the sides really flat together, and I started wrapping it in loads of elastic bands. And you want these to be placed quite evenly so that the pressure is even. It should look something like this. Then I started to mix the resin together. You want to make sure your pour, or the brand you're using, has the same depth allowance, because some are very shallow and the one I was using was quite deep. I can also put that in the description as well. And you want to pour slowly again. I started off with a clear and I started adding pigment. I think on average I only did 2, one that was clear, one that was pigmented, and I just sort of mixed them together in my mold. I didn't wait for them to set, I just poured this one immediately after. If you wanted to let it set, then you'd have a deliberate line between the two, but I wanted mine to blend. Once that's completely filled to the top, you just come back after the curing time. Also, if you prefer, you can actually use a lighter on the top just to get rid of any small bubbles. But ideally you'd be pouring so that there aren't actually any. And this is me removing the elastic bands. If you're really careful not to get the resin outside of the mold, you can reuse these bands and everything like that, and I think that's very useful. Once it's completely cured, and I mean completely cured, you want to gloss it. This just gives the extra shine back. Some people might want to buff it and stuff like that, but I didn't think it was necessary.